In God We Trust was inspired by the events surrounding Guantanamo Bay and the illegal detention of Muslims there by the Americans in response to the war on terror. It was something that myself and Sajjad at the time, who was the artistic director of Peshkar and also directed in God We Trust, felt was a sort of need representing. Ultimately though, the play itself, as well as being quite an obvious metaphor for American imperialism since 9/11, also serves to use Guantanamo Bay as a metaphor by which to question the state of Muslims and the state of Islam, to be quite blunt, I suppose, in contemporary times in the Western world. In that, if you look at it just in terms of a building that represents the housing of Muslims, centuries ago, those buildings might have been the Alhambra. Centuries ago, those buildings might have been a university in Baghdad, which were buildings affiliated to the housing of Muslims. Today, buildings affiliated to the housing of Muslims is Guantanamo Bay. So there's obviously been a journey there to have gone from the Alhambra to Guantanamo Bay. So that was also an angle to the story that I wanted to explore in God We Trust, and that was exploring it in God We Trust, in the questioning of what happened to this faith, and those who profess to follow it. But obviously at the same time, it's a comment on American imperialism, and at the same time it's also a comment on those people who are attracted to the fundamentalist version of Islam. What drives them? What are their motivating emotions, I suppose? What are the motivating factors to make them identify with the harshest version of that faith? So in God We Trust, we've got a character, Safraz, who prior to coming to Guantanamo Bay was a religious.
He was a 24-year-old college student, and he'd got himself involved and captured in Pakistan, Afghanistan, and got brought up to Guantanamo. I think that was his backstory. And he was just a student from Blackburn, just a young Pakistani man. So it was quite, from that end, he was quite, I could fit into that, because I was sort of the same age and same background. And the play itself was very interesting, and we worked on, there was an initial draft, and I think Avaes did about half of the play, and we worked on the first half, so the second half was up for grabs. We didn't know where that would go. So I think we did a reading at the Oldham Coliseum first, and then we had in front of an audience just to see how the audience would find it, and what Avaes could do with it. I think after about 6 months later, he came back with a final draft, and that's when the rehearsal process began.
The process was quite interesting in that I was always speaking to the director. I was in constant conversation with Sajjad, which I enjoyed. I had a dramaturg, Linda Brogan was a dramaturg on there, and we met very regularly, almost weekly, I think. I spent a long time in research, really. I spent possibly about 3 months in research. Researching, obviously, Guantanamo Bay, reading reports, reading articles and all this kind of thing. Meeting ex-detainees. I met the detainee in Manchester who'd just been released while I was researching for In God We Trust. But I'd also met the family of the detainee from Birmingham. and joined campaigns, so I immersed myself in the world of the politics around Guantanamo Bay, but at the same time I was also, because I knew that this play, as well as being politically motivated, was also had this element of religion to it. I also researched Islam, I suppose, and read texts and got quite heavily immersed into the Sufi aspect of Islam. Because one character, Hamza, in the play, for me, represented that part of Islam.
You know, he was a very peaceful character and older than Zafraz. So he was always trying to guide Zafraz and look after him. So I think that's their relationship.
And for those who've seen it, remember a scene where Hamza, who for me represented the Sufi version of the faith, and Zafraz, who later represented the more hardline version of the faith, more literalist version of it, interpretation of Islam. When they battle through quoting the Quran at one another and use verses of the Quran to justify their positions, those conversations took place either in Guantanamo Bay through that detainee. Those questions of questioning the faith, those conversation questioning the faith actually happened. Meeting the designer and the composer on the piece, MOE and Jaydev Mistry, the four of us, with Sajjad and I, would meet quite regularly. And I'd also have the conversations with them that I was having, and they wouldn't necessarily know the script yet. There'd be no script yet, and I'd just be telling them what I was finding in the research.
I really need to get inside the head of the writer and the head of the director to see where they're coming from in terms of the piece. And for me, that really helps for me to visualise what the sound is going to be, because I work in a very cinematic way in that it's images and movement that gives me inspiration for a composition, and getting the political perspective on the piece is really important as well for me. And I really did get that off Avaes and Sajjad, so it actually made writing the music for it quite easy for me, you know, because the context was laid down quite early on, and the depth of what the piece was going to be was really clear to me. We looked at Sufism and the music around Sufism, and some of that comes out within the music in the piece, and also it's like it was really great for me because there's that angle of music, plus then there's some thrash metal within the piece as well, so it's like poles apart, you know what I mean, and that's what makes it interesting for me. It was just like finding ways of marrying different genres and different styles of music together within one piece that's the thing for me. And so yeah, the inspiration comes from the words basically, and the movement, because one of the things I'll do is I'll create a framework of sound that I think will work before the rehearsals start, and come up with a few ideas, play them to people, and then once the rehearsals start, I'll sit there and watch the rehearsals, take notes, experiment a little bit. I'll take a guitar in with me or a computer and try ideas out on headphones, and it usually comes together within that process of the rehearsal period.
What I wanted to do at the time was to stay in one of these cells, just to stay in my little cage on the set, and just explore being there for a whole night. So I stayed in the building for a night, just to see how it would feel to be in there, and have that feeling of, I don't know, I've never been locked up or anything like that, so I don't know what it feels like to be in that position where you really just don't want to be there and you want to be home, and you're just thinking about your mum's cooking, just the comforts of your home, just sitting on your own couch at home.
I was very fortunate enough to meet Mohsen Beg, who was held captive there for a while, and he was really inspirational to meet him, because even though he'd been through that ordeal, he had a very forgiving aura about him, about what had happened to him, and I found that really surprising and also very, very inspiring, that someone who could go through such a trauma could come out of it with a forgiving nature. You know, and that's what I've taken away from In God We Trust.
You know, we're representing people who are in Guantanamo, so we're representing real people, even though those people, the characters, weren't specifically based on one person, but they're probably based on a few different people and sort of combined together, and the research that Avaes did. So I think from that it gives you that duty as an actor to make sure you really do your job very well, and get whatever the writer wants to get across to the audience, or the character wants to get across, really get that across.
So, is the play relevant still? Yeah, because I still feel as though politically the acts of Britain and America towards places like Afghanistan, Iraq, and now increasingly so Pakistan need to be questioned, need to be challenged, and I still feel they're unfair, and I still feel that they're wrong, and will serve no use except to further breathe fire into the flame of fundamentalism.